إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وبعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today in these few moments, these precious moments of Jumu'ah, we are going to recount certain incidents in the life of one of the great role models of this ummah. And specifically, she is one of the greatest role models for the Muslim woman. But her lessons, her striving, her sacrifice, her strength, her courage is a lesson to every single man, woman and child in this ummah. And the point of going through these incidents in her life is to reignite and awaken within our souls the role of the Muslim woman in giving power to this ummah and making it flourish. This woman, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she is the reason why Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he has 4 generations of companions in his lineage. She is the one, as a teenager, she stands firm and creates this legacy that we are living now of Islam. As a teenager, she is the one who gives birth to lions. So we title this khutbah as the mother of lions. Her first son Abdullah is a Khalifa. Her other son Asim is a leader of Iraq. Her other son Urwa is one of the most famous hadith scholars of our ummah. She has 6 children. Her husband Az-Zubayr is one of the 10 promised paradise in a single hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a warrior of Islam. And the greatest of them all is her father, Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Khalifatu Rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let us begin with her teenage years. And if you think about Asma bint Abi Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, she was witnessing, as Aisha tells us, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to come to the house of Abu Bakr every morning and every night. He would frequent the house of Abu Bakr at least twice a day, and that was the norm. So she, from a young age, is seeing the Prophet ﷺ, hearing the conversations between Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the Prophet ﷺ. So this is going on from the beginning of Islam, and this is one of the first households of Islam. And we know the nature of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. His whole household and everything that he has one objective. Life for them is nothing except the service of Islam. That's the environment that she's growing up in. But Islam was not forced upon anybody. There were many households where there were parents who were Muslim, but then some of the children did not accept Islam. Because Islam was not forced upon anybody, it was a personal choice. She is one of the earliest people to accept Islam. Some of the scholars say that she was the 17th person to accept Islam. And if you imagine in the environment of Makkah at that time, the Muslims were so few, the men of them. So then that gives you an insight how few women were there who had accepted Islam. And she is, according to some scholars, the 17th member of Islam. How can you compete with someone who has gone so far ahead of you in Islam? Now she's growing up. And now the Prophet ﷺ's persecution has reached its pinnacle. The Prophet ﷺ has the biggest bounty on his head, as does her father Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. They are hiding in the cave. She is married by that time. She is pregnant at that time. She is carrying her eldest child, Abdullah, her firstborn. He is in her womb at that time. Her father is not home. She's alone. The chief of Mecca, Abu Jahl, the enemy of Allah, the arch enemy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the leader of Mecca, the decision maker, the prime minister, comes to her door. And she's a teenager. You can imagine a child. It's a child who's opening the door to Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl is not coming by himself. He's going to have people with him. He's come to brutally deal with the family of Abu Bakr and to execute Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's threatening her. Where's your father? He's not here. Where is he? I don't know. In that intense moment of interrogation by the highest authority in the land, it's very easy for a child to crumble. A teenager. Our teenagers today, you look at them, what are they thinking about? This game and that game, and what am I going to eat next, and what am I going to wear next, and how do my hair look, and everything else like that. She is dealing with the highest political power that she knows, and the army that's come with him to execute Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and her father Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and to end Islam. And she stands firm. I don't know. I have no answers for you. And she knows. Our children, when you tell them, keep this a secret, as soon as a moment of pressure comes, what do? Everything comes out. She knows the intensity of the situation. This means life or death. And she holds her ground as a teenager. Now, in the mind of every child, the teenage years, as research shows you, this is where there's an identity crisis, a search for identity in every single human being at the teenage years. The teenage years are a defining moment, one of the most profound defining moments in a child's life. And this is one of the defining moments in her life. And what does she do? Her identity is nothing except Islam. The daughter of the greatest Muslim to ever live in human history, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. That's his daughter. She stands firm in front of Abu Jahl and everyone he's brought with him. And he gets so angry. He smacks her in the face so hard, he breaks her earring. But she doesn't expose the secret of Abu Bakr and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She stands firm. Just imagine, Abu Jahl is defeated. He leaves without the information he wanted to get and that he needs. He leaves dejected, beaten by a child. Because yes, he slapped her, but he didn't break her. He made her even stronger and more resilient for the future. And then, if you thought that was bad enough, then the father of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who is not Muslim at the time, Abu Quhafa, who becomes Muslim much later, he comes running to her and he says, look, your father, look what he's done. He's taken all the money, he's left us with nothing, we've got nothing here. What does she do? This intelligent young woman full of sacrifice and resilience, she takes a cloth She fills it with pebbles. She ties it up and makes it look like a sack of money, and she says, my grandfather, look, he didn't leave us penniless, he left us with money. He left us with money. She means he left us with wealth, which is the iman. There's nothing more precious in this dunya. He left us with wealth, and she covers for her father. She covers for her father. Then on top of all of that, she's the first one in Islam who puts her life on the line. The first woman who ever puts her life on the line for Islam. What does she do? She is the one with her waist belts, and that was her nickname. ذات نطاقين. The woman, the possessor of two waist belts. She cuts her waist belt in half, and she uses one of her waist belts now to tie food for Abu Bakr and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the bush, so no animal can take it. Every moment in her journey to leave that food, she's risking her life. In those days when the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr are hiding, she is actually sustaining them with the food. Her brother Abdullah is getting news from the people of Mecca, but she is sustaining Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in those days when no one else is sustaining them. What a nickname. And we'll come back to that nickname because they abused her son Abdullah later in life and her with this nickname. Soon after, when the Prophet ﷺ has migrated, she sets off with her husband Az-Zubayr, and she goes and migrates to Al-Medina. Medina life was very difficult. She is the first of the Muhajirun to give birth to her son Abdullah in Al-Medina. Abdullah grows up and he gives bay'ah, he gives the pledge of allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ at the young age of 7 or 8. He himself, out of his own choice, pledges allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. Life was tough anyway. So many of the Muhajirun were so sick when they went to Medina. The change of life, the change of climate, it was so difficult anyway. Add to this, poverty. When they came from Mecca to Medina, they had nothing. Az-Zubayr, what did he own? He had one camel, one horse, pretty much nothing else. Az-Zubayr is a warrior. Az-Zubayr's work 24/7 is defending Islam. He's with the Prophet ﷺ in every instance. Who's looking after the house? Who's looking after the affairs of the house? Who's supporting him? His wife, Asma, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. She is the one who has to go nearly kilometers to get the fodder for the horse and the camel. She is the one who has to look after all of the house. And remember, she's going to have 6 children. She's always dealing with all of those affairs. She's the one fixing the clothes of Az-Zubayr and the children. She's the one cleaning the house. At what age? She's a teenager. She says about herself, I didn't know how to bake bread. So the women of the Ansar used to come to my house and they used to help me and teach me and make the bread for me. And they were niswatu sidq. They were true women. They were really good women. Women who lived by the truth. She had to endure. Her hands were broken because of all the labor that she had to do. But she never complained. Never once. She stood by her husband so her husband could defend Islam. Her sacrifice so that he didn't have to have any concern. And on top of all of this, when she had money, she would compete with her sister Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha in giving for the sake of Allah. When anything came her way, Asma used to give it immediately. And her husband didn't have to worry because she was always good with money. Whatever little they had, if she spent it in the way of Allah, he had no concern. He trusted her because she was such a pious lady, such a good woman. Not only this, she didn't used to save, she used to just give as soon as it came. If I can give it for the sake of Allah, let me give it. Once she's carrying this heavy load from the field back to the house, and the Prophet ﷺ sees her, and he's with a group of the companions from the Ansar, and he's riding on the camel, and he sees her with that heavy load. So he says to his camel, and get down, for it to stop. Asma sees the Prophet ﷺ, sees the Ansar. She said, in the riwayah, she says, in Bukhari, she says, I felt too shy, too modest. How am I going to ride with men? No, I can't do this. And then I remembered the ghayrah, the dignity, honor of Az-Zubayr, the ghayrah of Zubayr. And I said, there's no way I can ride with the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ noticed that she's not going to ride. So he went on. Not to embarrass her, he went on. Then not only that, look how she looks after of the honor of her husband in his absence. She not only took that stance when she needed relief. Burdened with that heavy weight, she has to carry it kilometers back to her house. But then on top of that, when Az-Zubayr returns, she has that conversation. She tells him what happened. She says, today the Prophet ﷺ came and he was riding with some of the Ansar, the men, and he stopped the camel for me to ride and carry the burden from me. But I remembered your dignity and honor, your ghayrah, and I didn't ride with him. Az-Zubayr says to her, yes, I'm pleased that you said that about my honor and you defended my honor, but the heavier burden is you having to carry that for kilometers back home. That is more burdensome for me than you riding with the Prophet ﷺ. Why did she tell him this? So that no one could bring a rumor against her and her honor and the honor of her family. So her children grow up knowing that honor and dignity is most important in your life. Hijab, modesty, is the most important thing for the woman. Later in life, she's 80 to 100 years old. Her son, Mundhir, he sends her some cloth. She's blind. She's blind. Old woman, 80 to 100 years old. Old woman. And the ahkam of the woman are known. When the woman is past this age of, when she doesn't have menses anymore, she's past that age, Allah has allowed for her not to have to wear the jilbab, but just dress modesty. She knows these ahkam. She lived them. Her son sends her some cloth. She feels it at this age. She says, it's so fine and so thin, I fear that it will expose my shape. And she refuses to accept it. At the age of between 80 and 100, she refuses, thinking about her modesty and dignity, because this is how she lived her life. She's not going to give it up for some piece of cloth, some piece of this dunya. She grows and she lives and she has all her children, never complaining about her husband, always being with her husband. Her father sees the difficulty in her life and he sends her a slave to help her with the housework, to help her with her work. She says, I was so relieved, it was like I had been freed from slavery. Her husband couldn't afford it. Her father sent her this, and she says, I was free from slavery after this. But she never complained, never once. Then let's fast forward. The Prophet ﷺ passes away. A long time after, in the battle of Yarmouk, a fierce, intense battle, Abu Ubaidah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, another one of the 10 promised paradise, Amin hadi al-ummah, the Amin, the trustworthy of this ummah. He is the general. The Battle of Yarmouk, very intense. Fighting was so intense, the army is knackered, finished completely. Wounded, harmed. The night time, Abu Ubaidah is walking around to see that the army of the Muslims is safe and sound, checking up on them. He sees two figures in the distance and he thinks, two spies. Let me go and check who they are. He finds Az-Zubayr and his wife Asma, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, walking together, husband and wife, checking on the army, making sure they are all safe and sound. Only 3 people are awake at that time, safeguarding the whole ummah. 3 people. 2 of them promised Jannah on the tongue of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do you think the 3rd of them is not going to be promised Jannah? Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha, in every modesty, with her hijab, walking, protecting the Muslimin. This is the beginning of her story. And after the pause, we'll come to its conclusion. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. She grows old. Her children grow up. Her child, Asim, is a leader in Iraq. How could he not be a leader? A grandson of the greatest of this ummah, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The greater leader, Abdullah. Her son Abdullah is given bay'ah in the various different lands of the Muslims. And he is in Mecca. He has been given bay'ah as being the Khalifa. And he is in Mecca, around Al-Kaaba, in Al-Kaaba. Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha is 100 years old at the time. 100 years, blind woman, old. Bani Umayyah, Marwan, rebels against her son Asim and murders him. One son killed for the sake of Allah. He then appoints Al-Hajjaj, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, the tyrant, the oppressor, the killer of companions. He appoints Al-Hajjaj to go after her other son Abdullah in Mecca. Hajjaj, he comes and he besieges Mecca. He surrounds it with catapults, catapulting Abdullah, the son of Asma, and Az-Zubayr in Al-Kaaba. Now there is a conversation between the mother and the child, Abdullah. And he asks her advice. He says, "Oh mother, I want your advice." She says, "If you are fighting for the truth, then continue." 100 years old, lost her other son, been through so much, a weak old woman. She says, "If you are fighting for the truth, then continue." She says to him, "If you are fighting for the dunya, then you ruined yourself and you ruined all of your friends who died." He says to her, "I never wanted the dunya even for one day." She says back to him, "That's the way I raised you. That's the way I raised you." She takes hold of his armor and she touches it and she says to him, "Take the armor off. It's heavy, it'll weigh you down." He says to her, "Oh mother, today I fear I will be killed. And if I'm killed, they will mutilate my body." She says, "If you're upon the truth, then it doesn't matter." He goes. There's a fierce battle. Abdullah is not only killed, but they take him and his body and they hang it, crucifying it on the path coming into Mecca from Medina. As in Sahih Muslim. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he comes, he sees the body, and out of sadness he says, I told you not to do this, I told you not to do this, I told you not to do this. And then he testifies for Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He says, stating that he was qawwaman, sawwaman, wasulan lirrahim. He was a person always in prayer, always fasting for the sake of Allah, always tying the ties of kinship, looking after his family members. Then he says his statement against Al-Hajjaj and the rulership. He says, they claim that you are part of a wicked people and group, but this group is full of such good. And then he walks off. Al-Hajjaj, the statement gets back to him. So this politically for him is a problem. So he has the body of Abdullah taken down, but then he has it thrown in the cemetery of the Jews. Such an evil man. Then he sends a messenger to Abdullah's mother Asma radiallahu ta'ala anhum, companions, and he's dealing with them like this. He says to Asma, you come to me now. He orders her. She refuses. She says, I'm not coming. Then he sends another messenger saying, you either come or I will have you dragged by your hair to me. She says, do what you want. I will only come if I'm dragged by my hair. Al-Hajjaj, he takes his shoes and he walks with such arrogance and pride to her house. And then he says, have you seen what I've done with that son of yours, the son of the one of the two belts, mocking her with this name of hers? So she responds to him in Sahih Muslim. She says, I am the one of two belts, and with one of those belts I used to hang food to sustain Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then she says to him, we were told by the Prophet ﷺ about two from Thaqif, and Hajjaj is from Thaqif. Inna fi Thaqifi kadhaban mubiran. Two from Thaqif will come. A kadhab, a liar, a claimant to prophethood, and we've seen that one. And the other one who is a murderer, and I think that is you. She stood up to the rulership when she was a teenager, and she stood up to the rulership and defied them at 100 years old. A rulership that had just mutilated her son and killed so many companions. She stood up to them at 100 years old, and he left and wasn't able to say anything back. Soon after that, she passed away, radiyallahu ta'ala anha. In her story is nothing but dignity, honor, resilience, no matter what. She gave birth to lions. Every one of her children is a lion, and she rubbed shoulders with only lions. She defended the ummah with her dignity of hijab and gave them honor through showing them that the most important thing in our lives is honor and dignity, no matter what else happens to us. And for the Muslim woman, she shows it to her family and breeds them upon that through her hijab. She showed that a woman's place is not at the front, in front of people where they're looking at her and her shape and her figure, and she becomes the focal point for humanity. No. Her role, she showed it to the ummah. How to make the ummah flourish is to be in the background supporting, so the rest of the ummah stands firm in resilience. She is the role model for our mothers and sisters in Gaza. No matter what happens to them, they stand firm and they will not be broken. There is a saying that the world knows to be true. Behind every great man is a woman. Humanity testifies to its truth. That's why it's carried to us this day. She lived that reality. She lived that reality. And this reality tells you why the Western world, with all its tyranny and oppression and all its false claims of liberation and tolerance and freedom, targets the Muslim woman to strip her of her hijab, her dignity, her honor, because they know if the Muslim woman stands with honor and dignity, she will raise an ummah of lions, and that will change the world. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداء الدين. اللهم احقن دماء المسلمين في فلسطين يا رب العالمين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في فلسطين، اللهم انصرهم نصرا مؤزرا يا رب العالمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وقوموا إلى صلاتكم يرحمكم الله.